the public who wish to access the meeting may do so in the following manner, and the Zoom is listed on the agenda. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, and public participation in any public hearing conducted during this meeting shall be by remote means only. Anybody else join us yet? Let's see, I don't think so. Is the 4 of us enough, Kim? All right.
Yes.
How about we first quickly, would you like me to approve those 10:14 meeting minutes to get that out of the way?
Yes, please.
All right, I think everyone had an attached copy from Kim of the 10:14 meeting minutes. Any questions on those? And if not, I'd invite a motion to approve.
So move.
Second from, I'll second. Let's see, let's go ahead and do a roll call on that. Lisa Blazkowski.
Blazkowski, yes.
Ian Johnson.
Johnson, yes.
Stephen Durrett.
Brett, yes.
And Jim Ball, yes. 4-0. Okay, I believe, let me just get down here. So we are starting, I think, with Chris Maria in DPW. Is that correct? Or is the whole crew presenting on that? Who's going to lead it? Is that you,
Yep,
Chris?
I'll be leading it.
Okay.
So we're ready to kick off.
You brought the team for support.
That's right. I think we outnumber you guys.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think that's fair.
Intimidating.
Well, there was a police cruiser outside of my office last week, so I don't know. I think they got you beat. Go ahead, Chris.
So you want us to kick off? Okay,
ahead,
so you can see the names on the screen, and it's always kind of hard to introduce people over Zoom, so I'll just do it myself. So we've got Derek, Assistant Director, Maria Lena, our Business Administrator, Lisa, the Town Engineer, Josh, our Water and Sewer Operations Manager, Jim Stewart, Fleet and Facilities, and we may have Joe on. He's the Assistant Town Engineer as well. So I'll kind of lead us through the process here, and they're certainly the experts, and they know they can chime in, as necessary throughout, or certainly help answer questions if those come up later.
Okay.
So I'm going to share my screen and just run through show here. So hopefully everybody can see that.
Yes.
All right, so tonight we're going to be presenting our requests. Really, we're going to focus on FY23. I think everybody received the packet, and you can see our out years, but we're going to focus tonight on what we're asking for this year. Before we dive into the details of it, we'll talk a little bit about just some context. So, remind everybody what we're doing as a DPW, and then some things we've been thinking about over the last year, and then we'll go into some specifics about the equipment we're talking about tonight, or the capital projects we're talking about tonight. So many of you have seen this before. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I do think it's important just to remind everyone what we do and why we're here tonight. So the key bullet there is the first one on top. It says deliver essential services. So that's what we do on a daily basis, and all those things listed there are ways we do that. And the second bullet is really what we're talking about tonight. So setting conditions. So for us to do provide all those services that we provide, we have to have certain things, or we should have certain things, and part of that's equipment or funding to do projects. And if you look at that picture on the right side of the screen, this asset life cycle, so that's how we've really focused our effort on in terms of funding and how we approach managing infrastructure, especially capital infrastructure. So how do we manage the life cycle? And so tonight we're going to be talking about some equipment, particularly that is reached the end of its life cycle. And so just like that circle shows, you get to the end and it's time to reinvest in something new. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. And at the end of the day, the bottom of the screen, it shows what we're supposed to do, which is, a safe, healthy, sustainable conditions for the town. And that's what we're trying to do. So it's just a reminder of the assets that the town has. This is a lot of infrastructure, and we don't show this slide to, put a spotlight on ourselves and show off that we have all this stuff. It's really to make sure we all know as a town that there is a lot of infrastructure that exists across the town, and all of it requires some form of maintenance and at times replacement. Won't go through the numbers here, but I think you can read that and you already know that there's a lot of stuff out there. And so that all of these things have their own asset life cycle, and we're trying to manage it. So all of those things on that previous slide can be binned in one of these boxes on this chart here. And what this is trying to show, I'm kind of a visual person, so I like to see things in a picture. And all it's saying is we've got all these different bins for infrastructure, so roads, sidewalks, fleet, buildings, et cetera. And each one of those boxes has its own plan. And there's a little picture of a spreadsheet underneath, but that exists for each one of these boxes. And tonight we're only focusing on really the fleet and equipment and buildings, so the top two on the right. But I think it's important, and we want to make sure that you all know as you're making decisions, and as the town ultimately makes decisions, that there's a lot of requirements out there, and we're doing our best to identify them and make them known and look out to the future so that we can make smart decisions on how we spend our money. So this chart just basically takes that last chart and puts the dollars to it. So you can look out to FY27, and for each one of those lines, that's our projection for capital requirements over the next 5 years. Tonight, we're only focused specifically on the last line, fleet and facilities, but you can see there's some big numbers there, and this isn't to, cause panic or anything like that. I mean, there are big numbers there, but those are all numbers that as a town, we can figure out. If there were a crisis, I would certainly make sure everybody knew that. There isn't. These are legitimate numbers. It's just, we'll make some decisions. Just for example, it says FY23 at the top left, water, $11 million. So there's some decisions we have to make about some water infrastructure. We're probably not going to come to the town and ask, for $11 million or $12 million next town meeting. However, if we don't, then, there's some consequences of that, not necessarily bad ones, but it's a discussion. And that's why we put it out here to make sure we are aware as a town, what expenses are on the horizon to maintain what we have. And that's what this is. This is not talking about new things. This is about taking care of what we have right now. And then the last comment on this slide is just proactive versus reactive. I think most of us know that, if we do something in a reactive way, so some sort of emergency response to something that breaks, we're probably going to end up paying more for that in the long run. So we're trying to project for the town what some of our requirements are, and then come up with smart ways to address them and be financially responsible, fiscally responsible at the same time. And throughout, if anybody has a question, feel free to just pipe in. Otherwise, I'll just keep chugging away. So this is what we're talking about tonight. Again, we submitted, and you saw the packet that lists projects and requirements out to 5 years, but we're really going to focus specifically on what we're asking for this upcoming year. So sweeper truck, a 6-wheel plow truck, a mower plow combo, and then a water sewer truck, and then one project, which would be the town hall parking lot. And then again, important to remember specifically for the DPW is that we pull from typically 3 different funding sources. So we've got free cash, but also the water enterprise and the sewer enterprise. And in many cases, we're able to distribute some of the cost amongst those 3 funding funding sites. So this is just a reminder of our fleet, since that's what we're predominantly going to be talking about tonight. This is just representative of the 55 vehicles that we have that we consider the key vehicles. There's a number of other vehicles, trailers, and kind of specialty things that exist, but we really focus on these. These are the workhorses for the organization. As you can see, its average age is about 14 years old. The typical life cycle of these vehicles is 10 years, and that's really the, it's about 7 to 10 is what's listed for just about all these vehicles. And so 10 is really kind of the far end of it, but we're averaging about 14 years old. If we were to stay on the cycle we have been, which is about 4 vehicles per year, which we've done for the past 2 years, that continues a life cycle of these vehicles for about 14 years. So we think that's reasonable. We recognize there's costs to all of these things, and while we'd like to, and we are making significant progress, the last 2 years we've made leaps and bounds in terms of replacing some of our equipment and lowering that average age. We also realize there's a cost, and so we're not asking for what we think we're asking for something that's relatively reasonable in terms of maintaining this fleet. One important thing to note is it says here 8 to 12 months at the bottom of the chart, once we order it. So we're talking about it now. If it makes it all the way to town meeting next, say March, then we order it soon after that. We're still talking up to a year before we might see it. And we do have equipment that's on order now from previous town meetings. And I think we're all familiar with, some of the hurdles that are out there right now in regards to production and delivery times for all kinds of commodities, and vehicles are no exception. So we expect that that's probably not going to go down and potentially could go up in terms of delivery time, at least in the near term. So this is our 5-year projection for our vehicle fleet. Again, this is just those 55 vehicles we referenced. On the left side, you can see we've binned them by type of truck or piece of equipment. You can see the quantity, and then we've used age as our benchmark. There's a variety of ways to manage a fleet. You can look at vehicle hours, vehicle miles, a whole slew of things, all kinds of data. But at the end of the day, right now for us, the simplest and most obvious way to manage our fleet is by age, because it's on the older side. As I mentioned already, we've made some significant progress in the last 2 years. So it's a good news story. We would like to just continue with that progress. Highlighted in red, the red box under FY23 is what we're talking about tonight, but you can see what we're projecting for future years. And then at the bottom, some things that I think probably most people would already realize, which is, if we can get these vehicles replaced at what would be a reasonable time frame, we can get some trade-in value for them, which is helpful. I think we all realize that there's an increased desire and in some cases demand to be more efficient with fuel. And so some of these older vehicles that are from the 90s and a few from the 80s, we know now in 2021 that there's better efficiency for fuel. And then we would never put anything on the road that would, put an employee at risk in terms of safety, but some of this equipment is old, and we want to, keep it safe for the employees that are using it. So in the past couple of times we presented before this committee, we've talked about that previous slide and our game plan for how we want to manage the fleet. We've also talked about looking for opportunities where we can adjust the fleet and, if possible, reduce it or look for alternatives for replacing equipment. whether that's rentals or anything else. So this is what we're proposing for this year, some adjustments. So starting with the sweeper. So we have a sweeper fleet. We have 3 sweepers on hand right now. What we're proposing for this year, so subject to funding approval, we would take 2 of our sweepers, our 2 oldest, we would trade them in and purchase 1. So we would reduce our fleet of sweepers from 3 to 2. That's totally, like we've done the analysis there. We're not taking on any more risk. It doesn't keep us from doing what we need to do as a department. It's just a smart thing to do. Besides the long-term impact of not having to maintain a vehicle, it also creates space in our garage, which we need for storage. So there's some good things there. The second bullet's talking about our catch basin fleet. So on the previous slide we showed we have 2. One of those trucks is, I think it's probably the oldest one we have. It's 33 years old. We'd like to replace it. So what we're suggesting is that we buy a certain type of truck. It's called a hook lift truck, which allows you basically to swap the bed off the back. So you get a big plow truck. I'll show you a picture of it in a few minutes, but essentially you can swap the back side of it. So you can put a dump truck on there. You could put a spreader for putting salt on the ground, or you could put, in this case, a catch basin cleaner device. And so it allows us essentially to get 2 things for 1. So we would trade in one of our catch basin trucks along with one of our dump trucks, 6-wheel trucks. So we go 2, get 1 back. The third item here is related to versatility and getting the most out of the equipment we have. So we have a sidewalk plow that we need to replace. Rather than go out and buy a sidewalk plow that's going to cost us a lot of money and it's going to be used only for a short period of time during the year, and even during that period, we're not plowing a sidewalk every single day. We'd like to get something that's a little more versatile. So we can get this sidewalk plow that also can provide the capability to mow. And so it can be a year-round use for the department and serve the town in multiple ways. And so these 3 things here are just showing that, we're not just asking for equipment just to get equipment. We're looking for ways to be smarter about our fleet management. And in this case here, we're reducing the fleet by 2 vehicles, which has all kinds of positive impacts, besides just the fact that we don't spend more money on replacing that vehicle down the road. So the next couple of slides, I'll just talk through each one of the vehicles and I'll wrap it up and we can have a discussion, answer questions, whatever the case may be. So this is our sweeper that we're talking about trading in. Sweeping our streets it's not just a nice thing to do, it's a requirement. We have to do it twice a year per our stormwater permit. This vehicle is probably the one that's exposed to the most damaging material because it's picking up all the stuff people don't want on the ground and it causes all kinds of corrosion. Typically, a sweeper is going to get you about 7 or 8 years, and this one is obviously quite a bit older than that. And the other one is not much younger, so you want to swap these in and get a new one. So this is the 6-wheel truck I was talking about. So on the left side, you can see 2 pictures. The bottom one's a little bit hard to see, but you can see a dump truck. And then on the bottom left, you can see that's a catch basin truck. It's got a little grapple on or claw on the back that helps go into a catch basin and pull stuff out and put it in a truck. So we would swap these 2 trucks in and get the truck on the right, and you can see that lift there. And basically, you can put different attachments on the back of that truck, and allows you to do a variety of things with 1 truck as opposed to 3 trucks or 2 trucks or whatever the case may be. This is a water and sewer truck.
Chris,
Yep.
could I ask a quick question, the last
Sure.
one?
Yep.
Do you need additional equipment for the back of that truck, or will you be able to use things you already have to do these jobs?
So the cost that's reflected in our request of, I think, $280,000, that pays for what you see in that picture. I mean, that it wouldn't be that exact truck, but it's, that concept. But it pays for that, what you see on the screen. And then
The different
something
attachments.
like this. Yeah. So something like this, which is the dump aspect, something like this, which is the catch basin. And there's a third attachment, which is the spreader we use for salt.
Okay, great.
So
Just wanted
it's
to
a
be
whole,
sure that was
it's a whole
all part of it.
package. Yep. It's all
Okay,
right there.
thank you.
This is our water and sewer truck. It's used for all of our water and sewer work, particularly replace, emergency repairs and fixing water mains. It's, you could say it's on the younger side at 15 years old, but, in a picture, it always looks nice, but if you actually go look at it, the inside of it, the floorboards are rotting out. And in a lot of cases with our equipment, it's just the environment we're in. We all live in a place where it snows and there's a lot of cold weather and there's a lot of salt and other things on the road throughout the year. And so it just deteriorates the body of the truck. And that's the primary issue with this truck, which is why we're asking to replace it. And then this is the last vehicle. This is a picture of the type of vehicle we'd be looking at.
Chris,
Yep.
sorry, this is Ian. Just back to that last one. I'm assuming it was on the top was that truck doesn't act. It's not a dump plow spreader. That was the prior
I just
one.
noticed
Is that right?
that.
Okay.
I just noticed that error there on all these actually. So
Okay.
apologize for that, but thanks for pointing it out. But yes,
No
this
problem.
is, we're only talking about this truck here, and this is a typo here.
Okay. Thank you.
And it's the same thing here. So we're talking about a sidewalk plow, which we have right now. We want to replace that with something that looks like this generally, which serves the purpose of mowing and plowing sidewalks in the wintertime. So this is a little bit difficult to read, I know, but this is obviously the town, and you can see a bunch of different colors all over it, and those colors correspond to this chart here. And this is only recently completed, and it took a significant amount of effort by a number of people to put this together, but it reflects all of the mowing requirements we have across the town. And there's a variety of things we have to maintain with the mower. There's a variety of ways to accomplish that. So some of it's using a contractor, some of it's through our contract with our water plant, and some of it is done by DPW employees. And at the bottom here, if you can't read it, it's about 200 and almost 230 acres of ground, and then roadside, it's almost 105 miles. So there's a substantial amount of work that's being done that needs to be done. And, getting us a snowplow for a sidewalk is good, and we need it, but it also, this recommendation also allows us to tackle some significant vegetation, requirements we have throughout the town. And this is the last thing we'll highlight, which is this is just a picture of the town hall parking lot. So this is the town hall over here. These are privately owned buildings here, and then this is it's the convenience store, a pizza place that I'm sure you're all familiar with. So this is the parking lot. So the reason I'm showing this is because at least one of these owners, particularly the guy who owns this place here, he's going to redo his parking lot. And so he came to the town quite a while back and said, look, I'm gonna redo my parking lot. And since we're all connected here, it makes sense maybe to potentially do some of that work together. The other aspect he brought is that this is the driveway that gets the access to the town hall parking lot from South Street. This is his property. We just use it to get to our parking lot. And so he was asking about some cost sharing arrangement to replace that part of his parking lot. And then these other building owners have have smaller pieces, but they do have some ownership of pieces on the perimeter here for the parking lot. So what we'd like to do is get all those parties together, and we're working on this, but we're not, haven't gotten it nailed down yet, but we want to get all these parties together and figure out the smartest way to tackle this parking lot so that we can, one, have some cost sharing, but two, do it smartly and not have all these different independent projects happening that don't really make sense. I mean, it's a relatively small location. It makes sense just to, if possible, to get as much of it done at one time altogether. And so kind of makes it hard for us to go to these owners and ask them to participate in something if we don't, like we then don't have anything to back up what we're saying. We want to be able to discuss it and know that we have some money available to actually execute what we might negotiate. And so that's why we're presenting it here today. So with that, that's what we have to present, and I'll stop sharing the screen and be happy to answer or have anybody else answer any questions you have or highlight, go back to whatever you want.
Anyone have questions of Chris or any of the team?
Jim, just had one question. I know, Chris, that we were talking about next year's, but I do know, like, on the 6-wheel, been looking at your capital plan. I think there was another one for fiscal year 24 and then maybe 26 as well. Are you thinking those would be similar to what you're doing here in terms of the multi-purpose body, or would those be more traditional that you don't need, for example, the catch basin cleaners on all of those, or what's the thinking?
Yep. So they would be the more traditional truck. What we're proposing this year will solve some things for us that, like that, but that's the end of it. We don't need to continue to buy those trucks. Are, as you can imagine, are more expensive. We think it's a one-time, for this year. But kind of beyond that, we proposed it next year, another 6-wheel truck, not just because of the age, but also related to the adjustments to the fleet. So we weren't able to, there's a whole kind of bunch of details to it, but the bottom line is potentially next year, we would be able to trade in 2 trucks and get one, because some of these trucks that we have are singular in purpose. So they all look like they're big trucks and they can put a plow on them, but not all of them can hold a plow because of various issues that associated with the type of truck. Not all of them can put salt on the road. And so I think, in our opinion, if we're gonna have a truck, it should be able to do all those things. Like one truck, we shouldn't have a truck to plow, a truck to salt, and a truck to do something else. Get one truck and have it do it all. So next year, the reason that truck is on for next year is because we think we can take 2 trucks, turn them into one, which lowers our future costs in terms of capital replacement and that sort of thing. So anyways, that's why it's on there.
Thanks.
More than you probably asked for, but
Oh, that was helpful. Appreciate it.
Good. Other questions? Lisa, I can see you. Steve, I can't see you. Any questions you had? Lisa, go ahead.
I just have a comment, not a question. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate this idea of finding trucks and equipment that can multitask, because the fleet is enormous, and this is my second go round of 3 years on this committee, and every time I sit down and hear about the fleet, like, my head explodes. And so to see that there is actually available things that are twofers, things that you take a part off and you put a part on, like, it makes so much sense that I'm just, I'm glad that it exists, and I'm really glad that you guys are taking advantage of what's out there in the marketplace. So I just want to say that it's great to see.
I would echo Lisa's comments. A bit of a broader question, Chris, the original slides you showed, first of all, are those available anywhere? Because those are really helpful and useful. But secondly, all the studies that were on one of the first couple of slides that were represented there, have those all actually been done yet, or some of those yet to be done? Or have you completed those so you really have a good handle on what you need to be doing going forward, or what's the status there?
So if you want me to, I can pull it back up, but all of the reports, assessments that were listed on that slide that you referenced, all of that is complete.
Okay.
We have more that are in the future and some that are ongoing, but the ones listed are complete. And that, I mean, those things, a lot of people, all of us and myself included, I don't like to hear about a study. I want to see something get done, right? But I think we all know that those studies are helpful in informing and giving us a smart, approach for how to solve problems. And so all of those studies, reports, most of them are, pretty recent in the last 2, 3 to 5 years. So there's still good information in there that is informing all of our decisions that we're, or informing everything we're bringing to you when it comes to, asking for money.
That's great. I mean, it feels like it's being done within a bigger plan as opposed to randomly that way.
I'm happy to share Chris's PowerPoint with the committee. I'll get a copy of that and email it out to you.
That's great. And maybe I'm trying to remember if the slide about the fleet and the miles and all the areas that you're responsible for has ever been presented at town meeting or not. I don't recall seeing it, although there's so much material. It just struck me as very worthwhile because these, all your stuff costs so much money. It always shocks people, I think, but it is what it is. But when you put it in perspective of all that you are responsible for, it's kind of stunning as well. And I think that is a worthwhile reminder each time you come to town meeting for these things, because it really, it's substantial to say the least. And so I'd consider that going forward.
I would agree. Of all of the times I've been to town meeting, and there have been a lot, I feel like this, like us getting these slides, it's like an inside scoop. And I think everyone should know that the breadth of what your department really does watch over for us and have responsibility for. And I think it would just be a great illustration for town meeting, whether it gets worked in, one of the, the summaries, like the town manager summary, whether it's prior to, part of the presentation to the CapEx, like, there's a number of places I suppose it could be put in, but I think it's really important information.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that.
Terrific. All right, last chance, everyone, while we've got the whole crew here. Any further questions before we let them go and move on to schools? All right, it looks like that's it. Thanks so much for your time, everybody.
All right.
Kim, thoughts or questions or comments before I let them go?
Nope, I'll just distribute the PowerPoint and once I get it from Chris, and nope, nothing else.
Okay, terrific. All right,
Thank
have
you.
a great night, everyone, and we'll move on to schools.
Hello, it's good to see all of you guys.
Hi there,
I
Amber.
feel like you stacked up the two most expensive people on one night. So Chris comes with big numbers and I'm like, oh my gosh, like we make his numbers look sizable and manageable in comparison. So I'm here tonight with David Gordon, Director of Finance and Administration, and then Bob Ferguson and Kelly G. Capello are also in this mix here to answer questions. It's always a pleasure to come and meet with you. And I will share my screen in just a second and step you through. I prepped about 10 slides. I think our capital project sheets have listened to you over the last several years and have gathered better detail and more backup. We send them with a lot of backup studies and things. And I know that Kim thoughtfully manages how much paper load you get. So there are, for each of our various projects, more estimates and studies and different kind of guiding pieces and rough order of magnitude assessments for all the roofs and things that we do, you know, kind of as annual updates as they're going to come forward. So those are pieces of what we can talk about tonight. How about if I share my screen and we dive in? And again, you can, I think, ask questions as we go. I'm going to take a similar approach as Chris did and give you kind of an overview context, and then step you through the process we use to assess our projects and to manage the work. So let me just see, I haven't shared my screen in a while. Let's make sure I do this correctly. Let me just see if I can grab the right one, you guys. Let me know if you can see my presentation.
We have it, Amber.
Okay, good. So let me go into present mode. So as always, as I said, you know, there are 6 large buildings and then 2 additional programs with the borough program and the preschool that make up really 8 programs that serve 4,000 students in the broader community for use in our buildings, as well as daily facility set up for our faculty. Similarly, as you look at the context, I think it's important to look at the fact that we see it as a continual assessment cycle. You'll see tonight when I step you through that we have submitted our 5-year capital plan, but go back in, look at budgets, look at monitoring of the past town meeting, what was passed, what came forward, what all the debt loads are, projects of ours that might have moved forward with more urgency, and continually use that performance measurement to kind of strategize which capital projects need to be adjusted and brought forward for discussion. Everything that we look at is grounded in the 2014 DRA report, which we did, which was done right before I arrived, actually. And so in 2023, we're in year 8 of the implementation cycle of that data. And as you know, with reports such as those that do projections that are large overview projections, every year you get further out on that document, those projections are less and less accurate and less useful. However, they did provide for us a pretty comprehensive roadmap that outlined projects, and we pulled a bunch of those that we do in-house through annual budget maintenance process, and then those that come forward for capital and warrant article consideration. Currently, we're developing a new strategic plan, which the school committee will vote in the next couple of months, and it calls for us to go after a new comprehensive assessment report to frame the next 5 to 10 years and get fresh data. And look, we've done a tremendous amount in our buildings over the last 8 years, and we want to really step back and get a fresh assessment so that you have confidence that kind of what we're bringing forward to you has updated data. So shared project management through the capital project is something that we are fully on board with and really liked and appreciated the last cycle and how it created a more comprehensive look at the impacts at the town level for all of our projects in the community. We are one community with one town meeting. So each of our projects we know needs to fit within that larger process. So to that point, we begin by reviewing all of our projects. We look at assessing the cost impact and options based upon those that seem most purposeful and then against need, and we realign those projects. We then go out and we get updated estimates while we try to manage the cost of not going out and getting full design or bid type drawings that can then age out and not be useful until the project is committed and ready to come forward to town meeting. So there's a balance there between bringing forward a good amount of like rough order of magnitude costs for you versus actual biddable documents, ready to go out after a vote at town meeting. We do manage costs within the operational budget as well when possible, and I'll highlight a couple of those to you as reminders for how we then use that to cycle through what comes forward to you. So in FY22, we had submitted 6 projects. So just to summarize for you where we ended up after working with you, 3 of those have been completed. The sprinkler system is actually getting a walk down tomorrow. The gym divider at the high school was purchased and installed and is functioning beautifully. It looks wonderful. And we completed One with savings from transportation COVID offsets, and we pulled the softball article from Springtown meeting and completed that with savings from operational costs not incurred during COVID. That currently is almost at completion. We faced a lot of delays with regard to supply line and work capacity, but that's going to look spectacular. And we were happy to be able to accomplish that. Was about 295,000 that would have come forward through capital. It was approved by you to come forward, and we were able to then pull it back and leverage it differently, again, looking to be strategic. One is now in cycle for an FY23 priority, the high school chillers, which we had brought forward as a number one and got deferred on last year's capital process list. So we went back, but by resorting that one to FY23, it meant that we felt strategically we needed to go back and look at all our other projects and see if there were larger ones that we could defer or shift in our alignment. And we'll talk a little bit about that. One is deferred to FY24, the Armstrong boilers. We bumped that further back after looking at the high school chillers shifting. And one, the Mill Pond drainage, will be done with operational O&M funds by us probably in spring or summer of the upcoming year. And we planned and set aside funding to accomplish that. So of our 6 projects, that was the outcome of those. And again, I hope they illustrate for you our desire to be strategic, to always leverage bringing forward projects that we really need to be in front of you, while we also try to manage costs and do what we can to get things done in other ways. So currently for FY23, we're submitting 4 projects. Currently, we have a 5-year capital list that we've submitted to you, and it rolls out about 12 major projects. So in setting context, I think it's important to look at the fact that we know that you see several things happening with large projects, all that are related for things that need to go out to bid for care and management of buildings. Looking at cost impacts, there's the public bid process, which doesn't always play out in our favor. As we know, we're seeing that currently with project bids coming in for the roofing. There's always a delay between assessment and approval. You know that we have projects that we estimate at a certain level, and by the time we can move them through process and get them to approval, there can be gaps and cost impacts. We're definitely seeing COVID impacts in supply chain and rough order of magnitude and bid inflation. You notice that when we did the sprinkler project, we pulled it back twice and rebid it until we got an advantageous return on a bid, because the inflated costs initially just didn't make sense. So all of those things can impact cost, and we try to be strategic. We also have the ARPA funds at play, and 2 of our projects that you'll see floating in front of you are also up for consideration in ARPA funding. And so that would also, I think, shift. I think you guys as a capital committee, you have to work with Kim to figure out the interplay of those issues, or advantages as we should see them, because there's some really neat funding advantages there. And then leveraging fundraising and revolving accounts wherever applicable. Those are all the things that we're thinking about when we look at cost impacts and we see these large projects. Planning impacts for us, timeline to complete projects, cost impacts with town processes as you move other things around on the capital list. We're always trying to be aware of that. Overlapping project complexity, you're going to see me discuss that tonight with Hastings. Keeping reports current and not wasting funding and design costs, you know, just to keep rolling forward things need to be retooled in bids before we can go out to get a project shovel ready. And then the capacity for management on the ground, you know, really a lot of these projects are managed in-house by Bob Ferguson and Kelly. We don't have project managers for those. We try to save costs in the fact that he does the project implementation on those. And there's only so many overlapping projects. So right now, Bob and Kelly are managing the sprinkler project. They're managing the softball project, while they're also doing the other ongoing management of the district and several other small upgrade projects that we did that are coming to completion from the summer. So there's just like the setting context for all the things we're thinking about when we prepare what rotates forward in capital. So we have, of the 4 major projects, I'm just going to back up. Oh, I skipped a slide. That's weird. Sorry, I apologize. So we have 4 major projects coming forward. And just as Chris did, given the density and number of projects and things that rotate for us, I'm just going to focus on presenting tonight the 23 projects, because I think we're always rotating and updating based upon the things I just talked about. I'm going to look at the Armstrong Playground with you. I'm going to discuss the Hastings roof. We'll look at the high school chiller system, and we'll discuss the Armstrong freezer. So the Armstrong Playground. This was an article that was brought forward to town meeting in the 18-19 school year. We sought to use funds from, it was an interestingly written article that caused, I think, a sense of trying to manage too many moving pieces financially, and it did not make the 2/3 vote at town meeting. And I think, so we waited respectfully through the rotation of moving forward with fails, and now we're back to discuss the Armstrong Playground, which has continued to kind of suffer from the things that brought us forward in the first place. At that time, we had sought to leverage funds available that were left over from the Hastings project and to amend the authorization of a small amount of remaining funds at Armstrong's project. The language in the original Armstrong project to build that wing, in discussing it at the finance subcommittee, they really felt that we needed to re-articulate that authorization. So that's the past history on what you saw that the last time you looked at this project. It has continued to degrade equipment and play surface, and it's certainly an equity across the 3 schools issue. It requires an updated estimate, and the goal will be to provide a buildable plans by annual town meeting with shovel-ready project for summer installation. And this is looking at the past estimate and bringing it forward to you at $350,000, knowing that after we get, a strong updated estimate, we would adjust that as needed. If you look at the picture that I provided there, that's pulled from the original article. And it was a project that looked to add the safety play surface, which you can see kind of outlined here. So the expensive part of this project was the safety play surface, which is right now it's just mulch. And the area is very uneven, and it sought to basically provide a better level surface to incorporate it with some strong edging and to build a playable, that springy play surface. It then was going to refurbish some equipment and then add new equipment. And we did have full design equipment drawings done at the time. We brought it forward as a buildable project when it came forward in 18 and 19. I'll go all the way through and we can then come back and take any questions. The high school chillers. So the 2014 DRA report called it out as a level 2 priority, and they leveled priorities, I think, 1 to 5. And that was back in 2014, indicating that was going to need ongoing planned repair or replacement of existing units, which were moving to their life expectancy. Those are the units that provide all the cooling for the whole building. And originally, if anyone remembers back to when the original project was when we actually redid the high school and added to it, it was actually cost estimated out. They ran the actual venting, but then never actually, oh, there I'm going into the dark. Hold on, I'm going to stand up because I look like I'm in a movie. There we go. The actual project at that time was kind of pulled out, I guess, and they didn't do it. They ran the ducting, but then didn't actually decide to do the air conditioning. In the 2014 report, it outlines irregularities in airflow controls throughout the whole building, and it notes the age of the units. So, those are the units that provide the heating and cooling for the whole building, cooling for the whole building, and would be the same units that would be incorporated to expand so that we could look at air conditioning the gyms. So then in 2017, we did an assessment of installing air conditioning in the gyms. And didn't move forward with it at that time because of cost. And at that time, that was also when we were doing the debt management planning. We were trying to strategically like hold off on some large projects while we got a handle on how we wanted to level the debt at that 7% plan. In 2019, we did a rough order of magnitude. We actually did design plans and developed what it would take to add capacity. They recommend replacing the units that were existing at the same time while we add a unit so that we get the expanded capacity, and that it would currently also allow us to pick up efficiencies in terms of electricity use and just the general efficiency of systems now being more advantageous. Currently, this is one of the ARPA funding requests because it provides HVAC-based air filtration and quality air cycling. It's very much kind of typical to the type of projects that communities are putting forward. And the estimate when we completed it was $1,500,000. So this would allow us to go ahead and provide all new chillers, and we would pick up the capacity to go ahead and also cool both gyms. That provides, of course, for the whole community. And it's also our emergency placement for the town. So again, it is one of the sites that we are to use for emergency shelter. And so that's one of the areas where all the beds and different things go for any extended emergency use. The Armstrong walk-in freezer, we've deferred placement on this a couple times. I mean, they basically continue to run until they don't. You know, it's like one of those things where every year you're like, is it this year? Is it the next year? They don't give you a lot of signals that they're going to tap out. I mean, you'll make some service calls on them. You see some change in cooling capacities. And I think by nature, the concern is that these tend to then die, and you've got then a major need, and you have to then order it and bring it in. And we've got one serviceable freezer in each of the elementary schools. So it would certainly we would need to bring in kind of emergency backup freezer of some type. So it's the kind of thing you're kind of playing with risks to wait. So that's been brought forward for this year. And I think we moved it off 1 year before. And the Hastings. So the Hastings project, again, is layers of complexity. You have to have a very strong working memory for all of the various overlays of the project at Hastings. Hastings has multiple projects that are intertwined. Currently, the sprinklers are being installed, as I said. The HVAC funding replacement has been voted at a past town meeting, like $1 million plus, almost $2 million, I think. I can pull up that number. The HVAC gap, when we actually went out for the bid, is being requested through ARPA funds. So we finished the sprinklers and we went out to bid on the HVAC, and it came in like $1 million more higher than it should have been for the money we had in the voted funds. So the ARPA would allow us to close that gap so that we would have the funding available to actually do the HVAC replacements. And again, the cost estimates for actually installing the HVAC tip the ADA compliance at Hastings. So we've been kind of threading the needle on a lot of projects over there so that it hadn't triggered the ADA compliance, which is 30% of the total replacement value of the building. And things are so expensive, and we've done enough projects over there that we just can't get forward anymore without actually going ahead and starting to manage the ADA compliance issues at the building. Currently, there's a cost estimate in development. We've had a preliminary assessment, and they're actually doing a stronger cost estimate for us on that. I'm holding, you heard me articulate from the Armstrong project, that remember we came forward and we wanted to reallocate some funds from Hastings. That money is now holding because I believe we need to hold it there and potentially hope that it could cover the ADA fund compliance needs at Hastings. originally we thought, fine, we would go for the Armstrong Playground. We would hold the project funds that were already allotted for Hastings and use it for a potential playground upgrade there. But at this point, the most important thing is to get the alignment of these project needs at Hastings managed. And so that warrant article will hold and could potentially serve as the ADA compliance coverage of funding. The roof replacement, which is before you in this list, was pulled forward because it's new to your project list. It wasn't one that we brought forward. We actually had Armstrong's roof and we bumped Armstrong's roof back 2 years. This roof should be completed before we do the HVAC project work because the roof reinforcement or management of the roof should be completed before we do the HVAC. So that's a lot to take in with that project. If your memory pushes way back enough, you'll remember that we were accepted by the MSBA for a envelope recovery project that was about $12 million. And we withdrew from that project kind of upon request of shared decision making at the time, that it was just going to be, we were still going to have to pay our proportional part, and it was coming when there were several other projects stacked up. And the finance subcommittee working with school committee asked us to defer on this one, and we withdrew from that. So those pieces of the project are now kind of getting piecemealed, in a timely manner as much as we can handle them, but they're starting to overlap at a level at which Hastings, we need to just focus on this building and get these pieces complete. So that's a lot to take in. As I said, I think our numbers always make, Chris and I coming together always a bad, maybe should separate us next year. But I certainly recognize the weight of the size of those type of projects when you're looking at large construction. So I guess I would open it up for discussion.
Amber, could you just clarify for me the status on the ARPA funds? Where does that stand, and when do you know or learn whether those are approved and coming or not?
Well, I would defer to Kim to talk a little bit about that. I mean, I'm a member of that initial discussion in the sense that Christy is guiding that, working with our finance subcommittee, which, is kind of the chair of both boards, and Christy's team to look at our financial work. And I think she's defined a targeted process to do a similar ranking. And in process right now, actually, they're due to Christy on Friday. All of the projects that were submitted for ARPA funds now have to be ranked, prioritized, so they can be reviewed. It might well be that they come to you guys. I'm not sure what process will be defined, and I would defer to Kim to figure out how we move, what she can provide an update on.
Sure. We don't have an exact timeline, in part. Some of this is awaiting further clarification from what is allowed under the Treasury guidance, as well as recently as I think 2 weeks ago, last minute request from our state legislative delegation to identify projects that could potentially be funded through the state's pot of money. So we're exploring multiple avenues at once. I think the takeaway is it's still a little bit murky, and we would want to make sure that any project that we approve to move forward that we are extremely confident that it is truly eligible for ARPA funding. So there's sort of two things happening concurrently. The internal finance team is reviewing proposals, asking for more information, trying to determine that they actually fit in categories, and then to also understand and make sure that if we bring these projects forward, tell the town we're bringing these projects forward with this identified funding source, that we have a very high confidence level that we will in fact be able to use the ARPA money. Our timeline, we're hoping that we would have some sense of when and how this process would work, probably realistically January.
Okay.
Nice summary. It's both exciting and complex. Like I feel like managing the ARPA funds and the COVID funds from the state level, and then our capital progress is a little bit like the Hastings project. Like they're all intertwined, and you feel like you don't know how to get them in the right order to get everything done in the right way. And you're trying to move forward, and you've got things on these timelines. So it is really complex. I think the team's doing a good job to look at it. I think how it impacts your capital planning will be an interesting part of your discussion. And it might well be that we end up amending things prior to town meeting. I think it's gonna be really interesting, based upon what happens. You might have a preliminary list and a second list. I mean, I don't really know. We're here to figure it out with you, mostly because we do have projects that could qualify potentially, and they're big ticket items, and they would certainly impact the trajectory of capital planning. If the high school chillers got accepted into that and could move forward, either through the town funding we have or through the state funding, that shuffles the deck in terms of your planning. So
That was the reason for
Interesting.
my question.
yeah, no, I know. It's hard to wrap your head around. Yeah.
Okay.
Ian.
Amber, maybe you can pull your screen share off so I can see folks.
Sure.
If you would,
Yep.
that would be great.
There we go.
Ian, go ahead.
I just had a couple questions, Amber, thanks for the presentation. The first, under the Hastings roof, it looks like the funding source you have there was general operating. Can you just clarify that? Is that accurate, or it seems like that size might be more of a borrow type?
Let me just look. I'm trying to see. Let me back up and look at my present. So under which one?
Under the
Hastings roof.
Hastings roof,
Let me just see.
the funding source in our sheets.
It's general
funding
fund.
source 1, which says general fund operating revenues.
I would assume, I would agree with you that it's, that might be an error on our notation. I mean, the roof project would be a borrow. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Great.
Good catch.
Then the second question I had, and I think we talked about this before, but with the chillers at the high school, and then we have for 2024 the high school roof replacement. Is that only a portion of the roof that the chillers wouldn't impact? So I think we had talked before about not doing the chillers and then the next year going and replacing the entire roof.
So I would let Bob Ferguson weigh in, but I believe that, I mean, again, like roofing gets replaced around chillers all the time. We could do it in either order. I think the roof will have to decide if we do the roof in stages, because it's broken out to levels A and B, and we just got a current update on the roof, which is different than that rim project, which we kind of keep kicking the can down the road on that one as far as possible. I think you can do them in either order. I think the roof estimate's an even bigger number, so I would be intrigued about whether or not we should break it in two, or so I think it still needs to be discussed. Bob, do you have anything to add to that? I mean, you can do it in either. I think the recommendation is it's better to do the whole roof at the same time, is what they say, not that you can't do the chillers first. It's more that they think when you do the roofing, you're better to do the whole roof at once, as opposed to patch and doing it in sections. I mean, that's their recommendation, but it's a matter of cost management.
Yeah, I think you may have answered my question. The question was, I just want to make sure that we weren't putting in the chillers and then replacing the roof was making us remove the chillers or lift them. And I'm not a maintenance person, as you can see, but that was just my question. Just want to make sure we weren't going to be wasting
destroying work you've already done to do the work.
Right. No, my understanding is it can be done in either order.
Yeah, the whole schedule for doing the roof at the high school was targeted based on what we're going to do with the chillers. You really need to fix the roof before you replace the chillers, so that in fact the foundation for the chillers has already been designed into the new roof.
So, Steve, that's different than the order that I understood we could do them, because the chillers, if we can get the funding for the chillers, could go in and the roof can be done after, is my understanding.
Oh, No, they can't, because the chillers cover the roof, and the roof is a membrane. So the design of the chillers and how it's supported is integral with what the roofing's going to be. And so you really need to take the chillers off, fix the roof, put the chillers back on, because the cutting of the membrane is the critical part of. I'm sure that's a proposal by Garland, and so we got to look at the details that are.
Well, I would say for further discussion then, because I think otherwise, like, we don't have the high school roof on this request. We forwarded Hastings, because we have to do Hastings in front for.
Yeah, my comment applies to wherever we've got chillers and need to replace the roof. So, you know, obviously Garland knows how to get this done, having done it many times before. And so, you know, but again, we're putting the cart before the horse. We need to know that we have the money for the roof before we can deal with the chillers.
I never told you that. Lost that last part there, Steve. I assume you were saying we need to know the roof can be done first before the chillers are done. So it's got to all be funded effectively.
Yeah, and I would say that obviously the way that we support the chillers has to project from the structure through the membrane, and you know, you have to have the knowledge of how you do both in order to do one in the proper order.
So Steve, there can't be seams in the membrane around, for instance, the chiller units. It has to be one entire continuous membrane.
What happens is that you end up with let's call it a piece of angle iron that sticks up, supported by below. Okay, and if you now place the membrane, then the two have to be integral. There has to be a boot that comes up through the membrane that is made watertight. So in fact, it surrounds the metal projection that supports the chillers. And, you know, this has been the cart and discussion that we've had many times before. And so it has to be an integrated process to know, one, since the chillers are heavier now than they were before. And the roofs are really awful in terms of the way the schools were designed. You know, in particular, Hastings is a mixed bag of different things as far as the roofs are concerned. So all of that has to be integrated into this process. So just having a roof price without knowing exactly how the chillers affect it, you know, is an important consideration.
But Steve, I get back to the question: can the chill, if you know all that, can the chillers be replaced prior to the roof being replaced? Or does
I think
does the roof have to
integrated
become? Okay.
Well, let's say you could do a section where the chillers are, okay? And therefore there has to be a division between the area that you're doing with the chillers versus, let's say, all the rest of the roof. And it has to be designed in the way that the membranes are placed.
Okay.
If you've ever been on any roof that's a membrane roof, particularly our schools, what it looks like is at least at Hastings anyway, because I've been on that roof. I mean, we got patches everywhere. We got patches on top of patches. So clearly it's time. But the issue has to be done by both the mechanical guy who knows what he's doing as far as supporting the chillers and the roofer who knows what's going to happen when he does it. You know, if the existing supporting system for the chillers is adequate, then the roof can go on and the chillers can come at any time after that.
My question then for our committee, all we have in front of us for rating for 23 for the high school, let's take Hastings off. For the high school, all we have in front of us is that we need to comment on moving forward with the high school rooftop chiller. And yet it sounds to me like what you're saying is we shouldn't be, because we don't have in front of us for 23 any aspect of the roof that would make this possible. Am I reading that wrong?
This is Bob. I just want to
I think
interject you for a minute that I think the mindset here going forward, the strategy was because of the complexity of the Hastings project and what needed to be done, and the fact that there was project funding already approved at town meeting, the priority became Hastings. The Hastings roof should be done first in 23, and we pushed the high school out for another year because, number one, we maintained the roof at the high school, and we figured it's more important to get the chillers and the AC, HVAC system up to snuff. Now, like Steve Durrett did point out, we could do the membrane around the areas where the chillers are going to be installed. But for the most part, the decision was made that the high school roof has lasted this long with the maintenance. It can last like maybe a year or two more. And that's how we ended up where we are today with the funding.
But just
So,
a
yeah.
follow up there to Lisa's and Ian's point. Are we going to be repeating work if we do the roof the next year in the area of these chillers, or does this number include replacing the membrane at least underneath these chillers so that isn't redundant work going forward?
Right. I
So
think
go ahead, Bob.
that's a good question. And, in an ideal world, naturally, the entire roof A and B should be done ahead of any of the additional, equipment that has to be loaded onto the roof. But this isn't a perfect world. And the membrane underneath that area for the HVAC is not that large an area. I shouldn't suspect that would be cost prohibitive to fund, even if we had to fund it from our general fund in order to get this project off the ground.
I think that to comment on this, order of operations, Hastings is before you as a package for all the things we've just discussed. The chillers, to Bob's point, can be and should be, again, we're trying to stage and break these costs out, and replacing the chillers in that space is viable, and that the high school roof would follow later is my understanding, and looking at the estimates and discussions we had, viable and possible and appropriate to put before you. So, again, I think to Bob's point, it's not a perfect world. We can't just stack all these projects on top of each other. They have to be staged and broken apart. Again, to Steve's point, though, in a logical operational order for installation. And it's my understanding that the load on the roof there is fine to take the chillers, and that the space is not too large for us to do the preparation under where they would go and then do the roofing probably 2 years out, because it's in much better shape than Armstrong or Hastings roof.
Absolutely correct. You nailed it with that.
So thank you. I've been looking at the paperwork a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, I just didn't want to say, oh yeah, I'm going to give this high scores and then have, you send it to town meeting, people say, okay, we need these. And then in 3 years, nothing's been done because, oh, by the way, did we tell you that next year we have to ask you to fix the roof before we can even do this?
No, right.
That's a bait and switch that nobody wants to get handed.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you completely. And I feel like we've worked very hard to look at these large, expensive projects and stage them out thoughtfully. Again, where we're maintaining all the facilities, benefiting everybody in the trajectory across their experiences in the schools, which is also a component of the work, while we also are thoughtful about the financial impacts. And it is, not for the faint-hearted to get smart about all of the engineering work that goes into it. Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions of Amber and her team while we've got them?
I guess, Jim, just back, and not to belabor this, but I think, Amber, it sounds like it's possible, it's feasible, the way things done. I would just, because we know, as Lisa said, if we prioritize it, but I think getting those questions answered, then being prepared to present them at town meeting, because we know that people, as I said, smarter than me, because I don't understand this stuff, are going to ask those types of questions, and we want to be prepared and have the answer saying, no, this can be done. Here's the solution. Everything's fine. And I think to all three of our points here, the worst thing we do is then come and say, oh yeah, it should only be 2.5 million, but we need 3 million for the roof because we have to remove the
new chillers.
Chillers, so we get the roof
to repair
down.
the roof under them.
So
Yeah,
we
exactly.
can definitely, the work on this is current and just completed in terms of the estimates. So what we'll do is we can send you backup documentation. Bob and Kelly will call tomorrow, get on the phone with our engineer and provide supplemental backup documentation to make sure that we have our order of operation correct.
Perfect.
Great.
That'd be helpful. All right. Other than the highlight of David's beautiful children, any other thoughts or questions?
My apologies.
They're
No
so
apologies.
cute.
They're
It's
lovely.
so-
No apologies. It made it a much better meeting.
Yeah, the
Right.
Yeah, they are.
iPads only hold so much. So much.
Great. It's all good.
Uh,
All right.
Thank
Last
you.
chance for this group. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys, as always.
good
It's
night,
good to be
everyone.
with you. Take care.
Thanks.
Amber, thank you, everybody.
Yep.
Thank you.
Night.
Take care.
Kim, I'm going all the way back to the top here to the agenda. I think we are on to next steps and follow-up meeting dates.
Yes. At this point, you've heard the bulk of the project requests for FY23. There are two outstanding. Jim Robbins wanted to bring forward a request for a portion of funding for the Bewalt Trail. Timing just didn't work out. We weren't ready to present it tonight. Would like to move that to our next meeting, as well as Mark Silverberg. If you remember last year's plan, Open Space was requesting an annual contribution to build back up some of the funds. They don't have a specific project at this time. They're just looking to replenish some of their funds that were depleted with the purchases they made last year. Last year's plan had them asking for $150,000 in FY23 in each of the remaining years in the 5-year plan. Mark has indicated there's some consideration in pulling back and not requesting those funds in light of bringing the CPA forward to town meeting and seeking to have the town adopt the Community Preservation Act. So he is scheduling a meeting with Open Space to further discuss that. And he would just be the last presentation for you to hear. Given that those are the two remaining projects, I wanted to get a sense for timing. And if you would like to start evaluating the projects that you've already heard from and potentially have a preliminary discussion at your next meeting about the evaluation, as well as potentially hear from those two. And then we could, depending on when they're asking for funds, Open Space may not be an issue. He may not be seeking anything for FY23. And then depending on what Jim Robbins is looking at for potential funding to support, it's basically a match for some potential funding that may be available from the state, is my simplistic understanding of it. That may or may not need to get worked into your evaluation for the FY23 projects. I'm keeping an eye, I'm looking at the calendar in terms of the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday week. Didn't know if potentially meeting next Thursday, November 18th, would give you time. I will send you a matrix to use to start filling in your evaluation of the projects that you've heard. You would have time to review the projects, fill that in, get it back to me. I'm also open to pushing that meeting to the following Monday, November 22nd. I'm just not sure how much time would be helpful to have to do your evaluation of the projects.
Kim, how much time in advance of the 18th do you want them? The day before, or do you want some time to be able to review our review? What are your thoughts there? Or did we discuss the meeting?
If I had them the day before, what I would do is compile them and then I could show on the screen and we could have that discussion. Again, I'm anticipating then we would need another meeting probably after the Thanksgiving holiday to sort of finalize and to see how things have shaken out with the ratings, the evaluations. The other piece I want to do is I do want to share with you the 10-year outlook that I've received from the departments. As I mentioned back at our first meeting, we're trying to build a more robust long-term outlook. Nothing at the level of detail that you're getting for the 5-year projects, but starting to have departments think about what are the big, and we set the initial threshold at 500,000 or more, the big projects that you have in the 10 years after this plan. So I'd like to bring it's this is still very much in its infancy. We really want to build this and keep working on it, but I do have some information I can bring back to you. We could probably do that at the same meeting that you're having your discussion of the evaluation criteria.
Just to
So
clarify that comment, is it 10 more after the 5 or 5 more after the 5?
it's 10,
So it's
10
15
after.
total.
10 after the 5, yes.
Okay.
What I'm hoping to build up to is the 5-year plan and then the 20-year outlook after that. In many communities, they really look at that. It's a debt. It's things they're anticipating adding to the debt schedule. So I think over time, we'd like to sort of work that into that whole discussion. Because again, if you're talking projects that are over $500,000, a lot of times you're talking things that may end up you're going to borrow for. So
Is our typical borrow 20 years, Kim, or is it vary?
for the buildings, I believe, Ian, you might have a better answer. My understanding is for the building projects, it tends to be 20.
Yeah, but it varies for other things. It really goes like it's kind of a useful life type thing.
Got it.
But yeah.
And do we
buildings
test the
definitely 20.
marketplace in to see what's attractive debt versus others, or
Exactly.
mostly it ties to the project?
It mostly ties to the project. There's some things that we can, and this is, I mean, Leah and her team do this well, putting stuff together. We short-term borrow and then advantageously go long-term borrow when we have a big enough attractive pile that has similar maturities in it to go to the market and get what we think will be a favorable bid for the town.
Certainly an attractive time to do it, given the rates, but not just for the sake of doing it. But that's what I think makes that long-term planning intriguing, Kim, because sometimes you should borrow sooner than later if you know things are coming, if the money's cheap.
Yeah, and we just did a big borrow very recently where we pulled it all together and got a phenomenal rate based on the market, but also again based on our AAA rating too, which is
any of that payoffs, Ian, or was that all new money for new projects or any refinancings?
I should remember.
That's okay. It's
I don't.
a little outside our scope. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to think of that in terms of this longer term planning, because that's a big part of it.
Yeah, I don't believe this last one had refinancing. We have had a number that have done that. This was more new finance. Yeah, taking things from short term that we've been borrowing short term for to put it onto a long term.
Great, good time to do that. Okay.
That is, I mean, that's kind of the fun part of all of this. As we start to develop and have more of this information, it does pull in more things like your long-term debt strategy. Knowing what you're looking at in the next 20 years can help you think about those types of things. It can also help you come up with a schedule. As you know, building projects there are a number of years leading up to getting a building project ready to go. So if you have a sense of when debt's falling off and when new projects can be taken on, it's just really helpful in the context of the master plan, the strategic plan, and all of these things that are out there to really start to map out what could this look like. So.
Yeah, and these markets create borrowing opportunities sometimes that make sense to pull things forward or push them back. And, it's hard to do that if you don't know what you've got coming, right?
Right. The flip side is there's also times like now where construction projects are probably costing more than they should.
Because money's so cheap, right?
Exactly.
A lot of demand. Well, borrow and tuck it away, and even if you got a little interest cost, and wait till the costs come back down. Sometimes it's worth doing. Yeah. So, okay, I don't want to get too off track there.
So I guess
I just think we need to reassess our definition of fun, just for the record.
Well, at least.
Thanks,
Kim, back to the calendar. When do you think you'd have materials for us? I think that would drive whether we have enough time before the 17th or whether it makes sense to give us to the
So by Wednesday of this week, I could have to you a grid or a template to use to start evaluating the projects. The value of that is just when it comes back to me, it's easier to cut and paste things together. So if I provide that to you in the next day or two, and then if I had something back to Jim's question, let's just say if we were to meet next Thursday, if I had ratings back by Wednesday morning, I could pull something together, get it out to you maybe the morning of the meeting, but I wouldn't expect that you would have had a lot of time to review it. We could discuss it at the meeting.
I will say I'm a little concerned making that choice with so many members absent. I mean, and remind me, we're doing all 5 years worth, not just the 23, correct, in the grid?
Last year, we actually focused on the capital budget items and held off on evaluating the projects in the out year. At this point, mainly because you've heard and you've gotten the most information on the ones coming
Well,
up.
that's why I was asking.
Capital.
I mean, it
budget.
certainly will take less time to do that.
Yes.
If you need 23 projects that we've got the detail on and not 5 years worth,
Right.
That's a much quicker ask.
We talked about last year, I know you weren't on the committee. We just talked about sort of what the value in evaluating all 5 years versus really trying to dig in and have more deep discussion about the upcoming budget year.
I think that's great.
We can certainly revisit that at some point, but I'm happy to send an email out to the balance of the committee, figure out if there's a preference for the 18th or the 22nd. But given that you're all here, do both or either one of, do you have a preference for one of those dates or do they both work?
They both work for me.
I think I could do either. Yeah.
They both work for me.
Steve, you're muted, Steve.
Come back to us, Steve.
Steve, you there with us
Hello.
still? You are muted. Maybe we've lost him.
You can include
All right.
Steve on that email.
There you go.
Oh, there he
There
is.
you go, Steve.
I'm back here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Steve, do either of those dates work, the 18th? Well, really to get the info back to Kim, technically Tuesday evening or by Wednesday morning, you know, by your second coffee on the 17th, so she can bring things together, or would you prefer more time and have the meeting on the 22nd?
Well, if we talk about 17th and go to school committee meeting,
The 18th.
Well, it would be the 18th, the meeting. She'd just like the information back to be able to put it together for us by the 17th.
Steve, just
Okay,
your prioritization of the FY23 projects.
okay, and you want that on the 18th, you're saying?
She'd
In
like it by
advance
the
of the meeting?
17th for an 18th meeting.
Oh, okay, I understand now. Yeah, that's probably okay. Yep.
Oh, Kim, you just muted yourself. There you go.
Do you have availability on the 22nd, Steve? If we've got several members who aren't here tonight. So I was going to reach out to the committee, trying to get a feel if you would also have availability on the 22nd, which is the Monday before the week of Thanksgiving.
Yeah, same time, 5:30?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
I would say the 18th is my priority just because my kids are home for that week when they're not normally. But I'm okay either way.
You said the 18th. would
Okay,
be
well,
good.
I guess the comment then is let us know.
Will do.
Yeah.
All right, and look
So the 18th,
for,
if the majority can make, I mean, I think it's going to be an important meeting to have all the majority of, and really all the members,
yes.
because we're going to get into that discussion. So I think that's pretty
Yep.
important.
Okay. In the meantime, too, I think part of this, and I'll include this in the email, as you are reviewing the projects, you have any additional questions or are looking for additional information, let me know, and I'm happy to reach out to the departments and either invite them back or see if it's just something we can get some clarifying information on.
Great.
And will you be watching for that additional information from the schools
Yes.
on that clarification on the
Yes.
chiller roof interface
Yes.
or whatever we want to call it?
Great.
Will do.
I
Thank
think
you.
the answer to that is yes, and I've just asked Amber to provide reports that are referenced, but I don't think we have them yet, so.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
If we need to, we could always caveat that one on the assumption that won't be redundant, repeated
Yeah.
work, but then leave it to you, Kim. But it would be great if we have that info in the interim. Sounds like she's going to get right on that.
And can remind me as well, though, that I believe that the ARPA funding is, we have multiple years on that. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, we
So
have
even if
several.
approved for ARPA funding, it could get pushed out a year and still use ARPA funds
Yes.
if needed to be.
Yes.
Well, now we've got.
Oh,
this
so
new-
if we didn't know in time, so we pushed it out and then we got the money, they'd let us use it? Is that what
So we
you're
are-
saying?
Yeah, we know what we're getting and we've received half of it. We're getting 5.6 million. We've received half of it. And we have, I believe, 4 years to spend it. So,
Oh, I thought we were still begging for the money. So is this is like the grant is given and it's the town that's deciding how it's getting spent, not
Well, you have to
we're
justify the
petitioning
spending,
for the
right?
money?
Yeah,
And they're
we know what the money is.
Oh, okay. I had it as like, when I hear grant, I think like in science, you
Everyone's
apply for a
asking.
grant, you get it or you don't, and you don't get to do anything until you find out if you got it or you don't. So wrong mindset.
no, but the piece here is the federal government has identified categories of spending that are allowable expenses. But it's it's a little ill-defined.
It's not
Shocking.
crystal
Wait,
clear.
the federal
That's
government didn't give
shocking.
you clear
Yeah.
Wait a
documentation.
minute.
So there's a little, and there was a really interesting story actually on NPR last week talking about a lot of municipalities are it seems slow to make a decision about how to spend the money just because we don't want to get caught where we've approved projects and then there's additional guidance and you find out that they're not eligible for those because once you start a project, the money's
You got to finish it somehow. And then so we have separate state money also that we know we're getting, or is that an application process?
So the state, the projects that have come in for us to review for our to spend our 5.6 million on, the town manager sent several of those on when we got the request from the state delegation. They literally needed something within 24 hours. Ultimately, they did not fund any of the projects that the town put forward, but I do believe they are funding the food pantry. They're sending some money to the food pantry.
That's correct. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. We get the letter back that everything we sent in, the state did not put into their funding, but yeah, the food pantry, I think, received $25,000 out of the state's ARPA.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay.
And whether or not this new infrastructure bill will have anything that might help us will be interesting to be seen.
Yes.
Yep.
That'll take some time. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments before we move to adjourn for this evening?
Yeah, I have one. Kim, are you going to put a summary of all these proposals on a single spreadsheet so we can work with those like you have in the past?
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you.
And I committed to having that out to folks by hopefully tomorrow evening, but definitely by Wednesday morning of this week.
Great, thank you.
Great.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
All right, then I would look for a move to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second,
All right. I will take a
Third.
quick roll call. Lisa Blazewski,
Liz Jiski, yes.
Ian Johnson,
Johnson, yes.
Steve Durrett,
Brett, yes.
yes, and Jim Ball, yes. That's 4-0. We are done for tonight.
Great.
Thanks, everybody.
you.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
night.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.